G'day guys, Socket here. Today we're going to start on a new series of tutorials, this time looking at how to use Room EQ Wizard, or more commonly known as REW, to tune your car audio system. Now, in my last series we looked at how to use the Audio-Tech Fisher PC tool software to configure and control your DSP, including how to do a complete tune using the auto tune features in that software. So if you have a Helix, Match or Brax DSP and want to learn more, then feel free to jump back and check out those videos. Now, while it's a powerful piece of software, it's designed primarily to interface and control your DSP. And while you can get a decent tune using the auto time, align and auto EQ features, I think you'll get a better result by using something like REW and following these tutorials. But before we dive in, I just want to walk you through the tuning process and how these tutorial videos will be arranged to follow the tuning process steps. Now, I've got to say, this is how I tune. It's not the only way to tune, but the goal of whatever method that you decide to take is to end up with a high quality soundstage. So let's go and have a look at what that means and how to get it. So the first step in getting a good result is understanding what you're trying to achieve through the car audio tuning process. And it all kind of starts with the, where your music is coming from, or the source. Now that might be your phone, or it might be your head unit, or a digital player, or whatever. But the music or signal from that source will be sent, via Bluetooth or coax or RCA cables, or however you have these two things connected, and it's going to go to the DSP where the signal will be manipulated and then split into different parts of the frequency range for each speaker to play. And then those signals are going to go down the wires to your amplifiers, where each of those signals is going to be amplified before being routed to your different speakers, where the speakers will convert the electrical energy into acoustical energy or sound, and then that sound will travel through the cabin of your car, through the air, bouncing off glass and being absorbed by the dash and seats and stuff, before the end result ends up reaching your ears. So what we're trying to do when we're doing car audio tuning is we're trying to measure using microphone, a laptop and the software, the response or the sound signature that's reaching the listening position, and then using those measures to manipulate the signal via the DSP so that we control basically what the speakers, or how the speakers are playing and creating sound, so that we end up with a great sounding soundstage. And for most of us, getting this nice smooth looking response graph is the aim of getting a good tune. So when you look at this signal chain, it's important to understand that all of the individual parts add up to what you eventually hear, with some parts playing a more significant role than others. So for example, you'll get better quality listening by using high resolution FLAC files through your phone than you will, for example, listening to music through a cheap no-name Chinese Android head unit, for example. And some people would argue that your end result is only as good as the source that you're using, and in some respects that's true. So your choice of source equipment has a big impact on what you can achieve, but in fact that concept extends to all of the equipment that you choose for your system, and importantly especially how and where you install your speakers. So choosing your speaker locations and how you install them is a topic for another day. So I guess the key point is that the decisions that you make about equipment selection and how you go about installing your system will obviously have an influence on your end result. And once your system is installed, you can't easily change that stuff. So the best advice I can give is to, do your research, plan things out carefully, sort of have a good roadmap for the system that you want to build before you go buying stuff. But let's go back to the signal chain. Once your system is installed, as you said, you can't do much about that. You can't do anything about really, the hardware or the environment or the listener. About the only thing that you can control in the signal chain once it's all installed is your source, which we've kind of talked about, and most importantly, the DSP. And that's why I always say if you want a SQ system, you really do need a DSP so that you can actively manipulate the signal, because it's the DSP that allows us to change and control the signal, and in turn shape what and how the speakers play. So if we want to get good sound quality measures, and we can use a tool like REW to work out what changes we need to make into the DSP, then we can make those changes, control what the speakers are playing, and end up with a great sounding tune. So now what I would like to do is take you through the steps that I use when I do my car audio tunes. As I mentioned earlier, it's not the only way to do car audio tuning, but this is the process that works for me. So let's go and have a look at those steps. So this is my 7-step tuning process. I start by setting up my equipment, then I measure all of my speakers in full range so I can see how they're naturally responding. I don't have any EQ or gains or timing set on them or anything like that. The only thing I have is a 1000 Hertz slope on the tweeters to protect them from low frequency measures, but otherwise they're completely raw. And then the next thing I do is, once I've got those, I will set my crossovers. Then I will select my house curve targets for my individual speakers and my overall tune. Then I will EQ my speakers to those house curves. Then I will do my time and phase alignment, and then finally I'll do some fine tuning just to tweak the tune to suit my own personal preferences, right? And then the tune is done. So now I just want to take you through each of these steps in turn and go through a little more detail, starting with the setup. So setup is all the stuff that you're doing before you start taking measures. So that's getting your mic and your equipment and wiring everything up, getting hold of your test signals like your pink noise or whatever, setting up all your preferences in REW, putting all your bypasses into your DSP and stuff like that, so you're ready to do your full range measures. Now all of this stuff is covered in the tutorials, but it's super important because if you are using, for example, the wrong pink noise, or you have a setting in REW that's not correct, such as your RTA window or something like that, you will end up getting results that are not accurate or are just complete rubbish. And when it comes to doing EQ work, you'll end up cutting out peaks that don't really exist. So getting your setup right will mean that every step in the process that follows this will be correct, and you'll end up with a good tune. So the first measurements we're going to take is our full range measures, and what I mean by full range is these are with all your speakers with no EQ, no crossovers, no timing, no settings at all, with the exception of your tweeters, where you want to have a 1000 Hertz crossover put on them to protect them from any low level frequency signals that could cause damage. But otherwise, no settings at all. And the purpose of that is to see how your speakers are naturally responding, where they like to cross over, and what are the limits of each of your speakers. So for example, if I look at this blue tweeter, it's naturally rolling off at 10,000 hertz and around about 1300 hertz. And if I look at this green mid bass, it's kind of playing up to 275, something like that, before it rolls off. So there really is no point trying to sort of push that to play at 1000 for argument's sake. I mean, it's just not going to do it. And then when I look at how these speakers are interacting, you can see here that the mid and the mid bass, are quite comfortable and interacting from about 150, through to maybe the 250, 300 range, right? And so you could put your crossover kind of in and around there. And in fact, that takes us to the next step in the process, which is setting crossovers. So using that full range measure information, you work out where you want to put in your crossovers, and the purpose of crossovers is to help manage the interaction between two speakers, right? So this transition zone that we talk about. So for example, we'll put in that dark blue measure is the free range measure of the tweeter. This red measure here is the free range measure of the mid driver. I've decided to put the crossover, here at 2000 hertz, and then you can see the end result, orange and light blue, and we get a much cleaner transition period between the two, and that's the purpose of crossovers. So what we would do is set our crossovers and then remeasure to see how those crossovers have turned out, and maybe play with the levels, or play with the crossover settings, to get these transition periods right. Now once again, this just explaining what this part of the process is. All the details on how to do your crossover alignment are contained in the tutorial video. So step 4 is next, and that is what we call house curves. So we're not doing any measurements or anything here, but what we're doing is creating the target lines that we want to EQ our speaker responses to. And so there's a bunch of different house curves. You can download them off the internet. You can create your own. There's a number of tools like Jazzy that allows you to create your own target curves. You can create them in REW, and we'll look at that in the house curves tutorial. But there are a bunch of different ones that you can use. You have what they call overall house curves. So this is the overall tune, starting with sloping down, and then at the treble end, and then sloping up at the bass end. And then you have house curves for individual speakers. So this step is all about creating all of those target curves before you move on to your EQ work. So step 5 is EQ, or equalizing, and this is where you're trying to smooth the response of your speaker to take out the effect of reflections and absorption and cancellations and other stuff by using filters to, for example, cut out the peaks and to boost the dips, and with the aim of coming up with a nice smooth response. So we're going to look at how to do that in REW, but eventually you'll get all of your filter settings for a particular speaker that you've EQ'd. You'll put all of those settings into your DSP, and then when you remeasure it, you should see your speaker go from lumpy and bumpy to your speaker response should be nice and smooth. And so you'll do that speaker by speaker, and you'll end up with a result looking something like this. So step 6 is time alignment, and there are many different ways of doing time alignment, and which method you use really depends on what information you've got and the measurement technique that you've used. So one way of doing time alignment is by using a tape measure, just measuring from your speaker to the listening position. Another one is summation, where you are looking for when you're comparing two speakers or speaker pairs, that they're summing up, and when they're not in time, they will cause a big dip or cancellation. So that's called summation. And then the third technique is using time alignment, impulse responses and phase graphs to do time alignment, which is only possible if you've measured using sweeps to get that impulse and phase information. But regardless of which method you use, you'll end up putting the delays for your various speakers into your DSP, and then your speakers should be playing together. And I always look at time alignment a little bit like cylinders in a car. If you haven't got the cylinders in your car working together properly, then the car will run rough. When they are all properly timed, the car runs nice and smooth, and it's exactly the same with the speakers in your car audio system. When they are not properly aligned, the music will sound blurry and muddy and muffled, and you'll get these sissy sounds and things coming through. When they are properly time aligned, the sound is crisp and clear, and people describe it as super sharp, right? So that is time alignment. And then we get to the last step in the process, which is fine tuning. And this is taking that bass tune and adjusting it for your own personal preferences, whether you like more bass or whether you want to sort of cut out some of the harshness in the top end. And if you've got something like virtual channel processing capabilities as offered in some of the newer Helix DSPs, you can use that virtual channel to make some of these adjustments or put in correction curves and things like that without affecting the timing phase or other aspects of your tune. So that's really, really helpful. So, and when you get to this point, your tune is done, and you can kind of sit back and just enjoy it. So that is a quick run through of how I do my tunes. And as I said, in the tutorial series that we've got coming up, I'll take you through in detail how to do each of these in REW. Okay, well, that's my 7-step tuning method. We've gone through that really super quick. As I said, the details for each step and how to do them in REW is contained in the tutorial series. But that said, it can get a little confusing because of one concept, and that is measures. There are lots of different ways to take measurements of your speaker responses, but the process is kind of the same all the way through the 7 steps. So you're going to take a measure, you'll change some settings in the DSP, you'll remeasure it, and you might go around a couple of times and before moving on to the next stage. And that sort of happens when you do your full range measures, or you're measuring your crossovers or your EQ, or when you're doing your time alignment work. And the reason this is important when it comes to the tutorials is it depends on which measurement method that you're using and how that's going to, which video you need to watch for each of the steps in the process. And so to try to explain that, there are 3 basic measurement techniques. The first one is the USB moving mic method. So that's where you sit in the driver's seat of the car, you've got your USB mic plugged into your laptop, and you kind of wave it around your head and you're playing some pink noise. And so that's a great method because it's cheap to set up. You only need a USB mic and a whole bunch of stuff. But the problem is that you only really get this frequency response. You don't get any impulse or phase information with this technique, and therefore when you do time alignment, you are limited to just using the tape measure or using the summation technique to do your time alignment work. Okay, so that's the limitation. So the next method, USB or analog, they use different microphones, but they both use, instead of pink noise, they both use sweeps, which plays a tone from 0 hertz through to 20,000 hertz, and it's picked up rather than sitting in the car. You've got the microphone set up inside the car at the listening position, and you're doing the measurements from outside the vehicle, and you're using the transfer engine instead of the RTA to make the measures. And not only do you get your frequency response, but you also get your impulse response and phase information, which means when you come to do time alignment, you can also not only do tape measure and summation methods, but you can use impulse and phase alignment to do your time alignments. So if you're going to do car audio tuning, one of the first decisions you'll need to make is, well, which measurement method am I going to use? And once again, I have a tutorial on called USB versus analog. If you can have a look at that, and it has all the details about how to make that very important decision. But what this means for our tutorial series is that I've got a bunch of tutorials on the setup area, so DSP and how to configure REW and which pink noise to pick, and should I use a USB or analog mic, and how all of these different systems are all set up and routed. Right, so there's individual videos on that. When it comes to tutorials on how to do your full range measures and your crossovers, there is different videos for each of the different measurement techniques. Then when it comes to doing house curves and EQ, I just have two generic tutorials, because it doesn't really matter your measurement technique, how you create house curves and how you EQ speakers is largely the same. Then once again, when we come to time alignment, I have a different tutorial video on how to do the summation technique versus time alignment versus phase alignment. So there's different tutorials, and so if you're only using the USB mic, the summation video is the one that you want to have as kind of a good look at. And then fine tuning, once again, I have another generic video. So if the layout or the videos seem a little confusing in the playlist, it's simply because there are different videos which apply for different measurements. So hopefully this little diagram will guide you through which ones to follow. Anyway, that brings us to the end of our tutorial today, or introduction today, I should say. Once again, I hope you found that interesting, and I hope you find the upcoming tutorial series will help you, with your car audio adventures. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys, and I will catch you later.